What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another Monday Market Data Report. I am your co-host of the STR Investing Podcast, Mark Lumpkin. This week, I'm bringing you St. Louis, Missouri. It's a major metro market, about 25 million visitors annually with close to $6 billion in visitor spending. So there's some opportunity out there. You got a lot of people visiting. Hotel occupancy is up 4% year over year. Short-term rental occupancy is up 7% year over year. And a couple of things to note is you're going to get a lot of people from Chicago, Memphis, Kansas City, Indianapolis. And then when you look at people that fly in, you see a lot of people from Denver, Dallas, Houston, Atlanta. I know I've stopped there a few times on the way from the West Coast to the East Coast. It's a pretty cool halfway point, at least for me has been. They are very well known for the Arch, for the St. Louis Zoo. If you've never gone there, take your kids there. The penguin exhibit is really cool, and they actually have a polar bear. Last time I was there, it's pretty epic. So active listings, you got about 4,000 short-term rentals all around that metro market area. We are only analyzing about 500 because we have some pretty specific parameters. They've got to be full-time STRs. They have to be active for such a certain period of time, so on and so forth. They can't be shared spaces, things like that. So we limit it down to about 500 in this data set that we're going to go over today. What's the regulation landscape look like? Well, enforcement is currently paused. So you've got permits are not being enforced right now, but there's a framework that's already in place. The city has got a 3% fee. It is being enforced. At least 50% of that goes to affordable housing. And so it's kind of one of those things that's up in the air, guys. I would encourage you to do a little bit more research yourself if you're considering going to this market, but they do require at least a 2-night minimum, which I would recommend. That's a no-brainer. Don't have 1-night minimums for most houses. It's just going to cause problems and not going to be worth it, not going to be worth the headache. And so what does the data tell us about how you can perform based upon your bedroom count? And then 2, what does the landscape look like for amenities, and what do people have? What are you going to compete with? And so let's get after it. If you start out with a 1-bedroom house, St. Louis, your average is going to be somewhere around $30,000 a year, with revenue ranging from $25,000 to $45,000. If you jump to a 2-bedroom, you see an increase in about $7,000 or $8,000 a year. You go to $36,000 a year in averages, and then you have ranges between about $30,000 and $60,000 a year. So small bump for a 2-bedroom. If I go to a 3-bedroom, we jump from 36 to 47. So we go up about $11,000 by getting that 3rd bedroom. And we see ranges anywhere from $40,000 to $90,000 a year in total revenue. When I go to a 4-bedroom, we see revenue jump almost $20,000 from $47,000 to $64,000. $18,000, $17,000, whatever the math on that is. That's the biggest jump. So go from a 3 to a 4 is obviously going to be beneficial, with ranges between $50,000 and $100,000 a year in revenue. We jump to a 5, we get another big jump as well. We get, $22,000 jump when we go from 4 to a 5. So we get $86,000 a year in average revenue. A 6 stays about the same. If anything, the data tells us that a 6 goes down just a little bit. And then to a 7, we get an average of a little over $100,000 a year in total revenue on the average, with a high of about $185,000 and the low of about $80,000. So there's a huge swing in the bigger houses, probably depending on where they're located, depending on how they're amenitized, how they're set up. And then once we hit that 4, 5, and 7 bedroom count, we see huge jumps. Not much of a jump from 1 to 2, not much of a jump from 2 to 3, a little jump from 3 to 4, but that 5, 7, that's a huge spread for you guys. Even from 3 to 4 is a pretty decent jump. So the bigger the house, the better. You've got the average potential being well over $100,000, and you've got the average on a small place being under $30,000. So a pretty big change and discrepancy range depending on where the property is located. Let's talk about amenities, and I would say this is the least amenitized market in the entire United States of America. I've analyzed dozens and dozens of markets on this channel every Monday for probably a year. This one is kind of laughable, if anything. So when we look at those 500 properties, less than 7% have game rooms and less than 7% have playgrounds, which means that our 2 most amenitized items on houses across St. Louis are less than 10%. We have about 2% pickleballs, 1.5% mini golf course. And then when we go into the rest of these, they're sub 1%. They're almost negligible. They almost don't even exist. They're kind of unicorn properties. And so movie theaters, swimming pools, saunas, hot tubs, fire pit, home gym, pool table. They're all sub 1%. And so if you want to set up an amenitized property, it's probably a little bit like a field of dreams where you're going to build it and then you're going to see the revenue potential. You kind of got to build it and see if they will come, because there is basically no data to support, no comps to support a super property like something that we do that's heavily amenitized. If you hit a game room and a playground, you're already in the top 95%. If you slap one more amenity in there, you're top 1% property. And then if you do a super property with 4, 5, or 6 amenities, you will probably have one of the only properties in that market. You might have a few comps, a handful of comps. But St. Louis, Missouri can definitely be a place to stand out, guys. We looked at a little over 500 properties. We analyzed them. The data tells us that they are super under-amenitized. Even just throwing a hot tub in some of these properties would really help it stand out. And so let me know what you guys think. Let me know if what you want to do next, what city you want to hear next. Hopefully that was helpful, guys. St. Louis, Missouri, great opportunity to set up a super property and be one of one. You basically have no competition. So guys, tune in this Friday. Make sure you listen in for our guest speaker, and thank you for being the best part of the STR investing community.